Welcome to the Jazz Piano School podcast, where we have one mission, that is to help as many interested people around the world learn and improve at jazz piano by providing structured and organized jazz piano education. I'm your host, as always, Brendan Lowe, and thank you so much for joining me. Today's episode is number 93. We're going to be going over Rootless Minor 251 voicings and improvisational scales that you can use to tackle improv over your minor 251s. If you're looking for the full-length audio version, podcast audio version, you can go to jazzpianoschool.com. Under resources and podcasts, you'll find that. Also, if you're looking for the Rootless Minor 251 practice materials along with the improvisational modes to practice, you can go to jazzpianoschool.com/podcast 93 to download those practice materials. So let's dive right in. So right now, what we're going to be doing is looking at the rootless voicings first. So with our rootless voicings for our minor 251s, they're going to be very similar to our majors. So just to review our majors, if you don't know your majors, you should definitely do that now. But our majors here are going to be 3-5-7-9, going to 7-9-3-13, and 3-5-7-9. These are our rootless voicings for a major 251. Now, our minor 251 is going to take on different rootless voicings, similar structure, but different notes because we have our minor 251. Now, in our first minor 7 flat 5 chord, we obviously need the flat 5 in our chord, right? So here's our major. We need to flat this. We also, I haven't talked about the major 9 yet. So for now, we're going to start with our flat 9, all right? And this is going to be over our minor 2 flat 5 chord. Now, the reason we're flatting the 9 is because this mode is coming from our C natural minor scale. And just in the key of minor, right, the only thing that makes a minor key is that E flat. I can't really stress enough the importance of the theory behind this because so many people use a natural 9, which I'm going to get to in a second, but I really want you to understand why this flat 9 is the way it is. And that is because it is the minor third in the key. When we're in the key of C minor, the only note that makes the key minor is that third, right? So when we have it in our key, we need to have that note to make it minor, right? So that's why that E flat is there, right? It is the minor note in all of our scales, in our natural minor, in our melodic minor, and our harmonic minor. You know, that note stays consistent and makes it C minor. If I have an E natural, it makes our key center major. And I don't think a lot of people really understand that because they're like, oh, flat 9, you can't use a flat 9 over a minor 7 chord, or a minor 7 flat 5. But that's really the true reason we start with the flat 5. And then we can get away from it, of course. But I really want you to understand that it provides a tonal minor sound that you may not be used to. Your ears may not be used to this, right? Because it's giving you this. It's giving a half-step rub between the bass and that flat 9. But through the progression, it resolves. And you kind of need that full progression to really understand what's going on. So, like I said, our first rootless voicing that I'm going to show you today is going to be with the flat 9 on top, and we flatted our 5. So we went from the major down to this. Okay, so we flatted our 5 and 9. Now, from here, all we're going to do is shift our middle note, or in this case, the 7, down to the third of our G7 chord. So now we get this, 7, flat 9, 3, flat 13. Now remember, again, we need the flat 9 and flat 13 over our dominant chord at all times because that also is a very important factor in the scale we're using, which is our harmonic scale. Now, if you notice this C harmonic scale, again, here are our two important notes. They're just flip-flop because I'm using the voicing down here, right? Here's A flat and E flat, and in our scale, here they are right here. So our C harmonic scale gives us the flat third and the flat 6, which creates the flat 9 and the flat 13 because we're playing a G7 dominant chord, right? So, if you've listened to the previous podcast, we use our C harmonic scale, but we start from G to G. Right, so those notes are very important, so that's why we have them in our rootless voicing. Now, from here, so we have 7, flat 9, 3, flat 13. We go to our minor major with our natural 9 on top. Flat 3, 5, natural 7, 9. And again, this is going to be our melodic minor, C melodic minor. Okay? And again, the minor major is a true kind of like more of the stationary point to a minor 2-5-1. Now that's kind of just like your basics, like I talked about last time. Can it be just a regular minor 7? Yes, it can. But I want you to get in the habit of really in thinking about a minor 2-5-1 first of being minor 7 flat 5, going to dominant flat 9 flat 13, then finally resolving to a minor major 7 chord, not just a regular minor 7 chord. Okay, you want to think about the 1 as being minor major 7. Okay, now all we do for the other structure, right? We have 2 structures to our major 7 rootless voicings. We have the first structure A starting with the 3 on the bottom, structure B starting with the, oh, my alarm's going off here. Cooking some potatoes in the oven. I'll get to those later. So we have the 7 on the bottom and the 3 now on the top. So our rootless structure B is this. Now all we do is flip-flop it. So we, I can't say that word, flip-flop it. Wow. There we go. 7, flat 9, 3, flat 13. Going to our 3, flat 13, 7, flat 9. Major 7, 9, 3, 5. Okay. So now how do we improvise with these rootless voicings? Well, again, it's going to sound a little strange. You need to get that root in there and really kind of hear the motion in your rootless voicing. Now, unfortunately, I don't have my pedal right now with me. Otherwise, you'd be able to hear the bass note clearer because I could hold the pedal down. But you really need to have that root. And especially if you're playing with a group, you won't need to worry about that because the bass player will be walking D minor flat 5, right? However he does it. And then minor major at the end. So the first scale we can use is going to be the scales I already talked about in the last video, right? We're going to be using C natural minor from D to D, right? And then we're going to be using C harmonic minor from G to G, right? So just moving up the flat 9, 3, 4, 5, flat 13, 7, 1, right? And then finally C natural minor. Excuse me, C melodic minor. Okay? Now we take on the same improvisation approach as we do with our other processes I've taught over the podcast. So if you've listened to the podcast, we're going to focus on chord tones specifically first and then use our connecting tones to connect our chord tones. So our chord tones are obviously D, F, A flat, C. Those are going to be our target tones. We're going to use the notes in between that, right? The E flat, the G, and the B flat as connections. And then we're going to focus on making our transfer or hitting a chord tone on the downbeat of 1 of the next chord in order to shift and move our harmony into that chord. Then from there, using our melodic minor over the C minor major, right? So to do this in slow motion, right? I'll give you an example. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, that should have been an A flat. Right, so again, you're just messing around with, again, the target notes, creating some, movements, trying to land on that chord tone. And when you get to your different, when you get to your different chords, you want to ensure that you're landing on a chord tone of that chord in order to really link the things together. Now, you use the rootless voicings the same way you would as your major voicings, your major rootless voicings. So there's no change there, right? And then obviously, if you're using your other set of rootless voicings, your structure B, right? This is kind of high, maybe if you're playing in the key of, E flat, right? We would have them here. okay? That would fit better. You want them to fit in the register that fits more in this section of the piano rather than having up, like if I was in the key of C, I wouldn't really use that up high too much. I'd probably use this structure first in order to solo with, okay? So now the other question is that, well, most people don't teach the flat 9. I mean, they kind of leave that out because they don't like the sound, they don't understand it maybe, or they haven't used it much. Again, if you listen to the Celia transcriptions, Benny Green is using the flat 9 almost in all of his minor 7 flat 5 chord solo analysis, and you can go back to my analysis on that to see that. So it's really used a lot. Again, for more of a distinct sound or kind of a more modern sound, the natural 9 is going to give you that. So instead of using minor 7 flat 5 with a flat 9 on top, you would shift this to a natural 9. Now it's kind of taking the major third and using it as an extension, even though we're in a minor key, right? I mean, obviously you're not going to have that note in there anymore. You're playing E natural, but again, you are kind of removing some of the quality of the C minor center to the chord. But we have this now, right? Then we're moving to the flat 13, and then finally to the 1 minor major. So the only change you're making is the flat 9 to the natural 9. That's it. Everything else stays the same. So in my solo, I would use C natural minor, but it's not really C natural minor anymore because we have the natural third in there from C minor. So you're really substituting the flat 9 in for that natural 9. So that would be my new scale. And then you'd move to your C harmonic minor. Everything else is the same after that. So just to give you a little example of the difference, here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? And again, you can interchange these however you want. So if you have the flat 9, sometimes that works. It's more of a opinionated, listening preference to you. So it's completely up to you how you would wish to use that. It's if you like the natural 9 more, go for it. If you like the flat 9 more, go for it. But I encourage you to experiment with both options. Now, one of the other things you may have noticed that I stopped just now is because I realized over your dominant chord, you can use the more of a sharp 9 in your scale, which you might have heard me doing, right? And again, using this, so this is going to be more of an altered scale. You can use an altered scale over your dominant chord, which still gives you these characteristic notes in that dominant chord, which is the flat 9 and flat 13. So when I switch to my altered scale, I have this sharp 11 here instead of the 4. Sorry. Right, so that's my C harmonic minor. And then instead of that, I can switch to my altered scale if I want to solo. And again, the notes that are going to be changing is that I'm adding this sharp 9 in, and I'm also moving the 4 to a sharp 11. This is going to give you a different type of sound, more of the altered sound over the dominant 7. Now, in my left hand, I can actually switch to this, more of a sharp 9 sound. Sometimes I actually like adding both, okay? Now, again, this kind of gets into more of your preference, right? Your preference on the sound. Like if you like this, there's not really rules to this. I'm creating voicings now at my discretion. So I personally like the flat 9, sharp 9 sound with the natural third in there and the flat 13. It gives a thicker quality sound, and I'm using more extensions. And if I choose to do that, then I'll definitely use my altered scale with my right hand. Now, if I'm just sticking to this, I can still use my altered scale, but I may, I may focus just on the sharp 9 in there, and then may switch to my harmonic minor. So there's a lot of different things you can do. You can mix and match. You can, just get creative with it. Again, these are just kind of general rules that you should follow, to learning this process. And then from there, I encourage you to explore and experiment. But the basics of what I went over in the last podcast and this podcast is really what you should kind of strive to know. And then obviously over our minor major, you want to focus on those chord tones, and the 9 and the major 7 are really distinguishable notes, so I love focusing on that. The 13 in there is very, very nice, and we'll talk about extensions and two-hand voicings and comping in the next episode, but this episode was just about more of your left-hand voicings, rootless voicings, and your right-hand scales in order to improvise over your minor 2-5-1. So hopefully that was helpful. I didn't say in the beginning, I apologize, but you can go to, as always, jazzpianoschool.com/podcast93 to download the practice materials, all the scales we went over in the Rootless Voicings, minor 2-5-1 Rootless Voicings for this episode. All right? So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned a lot from it. Practice all your minor 2-5-1 rootless voicings in all keys, both structures. Practice your scales with it. Practice your alternate scales as well, the options that you have. Put those together. Practice improvising. I know it's a lot of work, but again, if you can get this together, when you see those minor 7-flat-5 chords or the minor 2-5-1s in tunes, it's going to make such a huge difference when you have minor tunes, especially that you're playing. Your playing is going to sound much, much better instead of kind of jumping over those parts, right? When you get to those chords and the tunes, or kind of just skipping them because you don't really know how to tackle them or approach them, okay? It'll feel better inside, too. You'll feel confident. You'll feel good, like, oh, minor 2-5-1, I got this. You'll feel ready to go. So I hope you enjoyed that. I will talk to you in the next episode, which will be about two-hand voicings and comping your minor 2-5-1 chords for two-hand voicings. All right? I'll talk to you then. Happy practicing.